Ka tiake te iwi tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou I roto I tēnei pō. Kia ora everybody, Che Wilson here from Te Pai Waho, linking to you through a range of different platforms tonight, and I hope everybody's having a good night. Tēnā koutou, kia ora tātou. So as we start up this week's kaupapa, I'll just open us up with a little karakia and a mihi, and then we'll get straight into things. Karanga kia rangi nui e tui o nei, karanga kia pape takotoa ke nei. Te putunga o te kōrero, te putunga o te wānanga, ka puta ki wā o ki te wai au ki te ao mārama. Hui e, tai ki e. Tai ki e kia tātou. Tai ki e kia tātou I tēnei pō. Me te mii atu kia koutou katoa, koutou te unga e mātakitaki mai ana, e mii ana, e tangi ana. Uncle Rana, e moe. E moe te moenga roa, te moenga te kori, te wakara ia. Ai a pōpō pēr, tangi atu ki mui ki tō aroaro. Nō reire e moe, e oki. So, kia ora everybody. As I said, Che Wilson here from Te Pai Waho. And tonight is kaupapa number 3 on Whānau reunions. Our first kaupapa did a general overview last week at the airport. Covered whakapapa, and tonight covering history and tikanga. Just a little recap first on last week, and just to cover a couple of questions. And so last week I covered whakapapa, how to do the whakapapa, looking at different things, numbering, having a numbering session, which helps to identify where you fit, also understanding the generations. But one of the questions that came up, kia ora Monica, one of the questions that came up was, how do you include the surprises or the uri that aren't talked about? How do you include them? Before I answer that, I think it's important to note that there are often some things that I will share on here, and as I share them, it might sound easy, but I'm mindful that often it's not easy to actually deal with in real life. But the best way to deal with the strays or the surprises is to actually have the conversation with the person that's involved or the affected party, for want of a better word. And if they're difficult, you have to work that out as a whānau. If you're wanting to do things in a way where you want to include them, you're just going to have to find out what the best way to do that is, whether you get the kaumātua to sanction it so that you don't get the blame for writing the book, or whether you make that decision with the affected parties. You've just got to navigate that. One point I will make, though, it's really essential to note that it's not that person who's the surprise. It's not their fault. They're the result of often extracurricular activities, and it is what it is. And if you're acknowledging whakapapa, we shouldn't be selective when it comes to acknowledging whakapapa, even though it can hurt people. So you just got to navigate that and have the conversations rather than just doing it without having any talk. So I think that was the key question that came through as I sifted through the different questions that were coming out. Moving to this week's kaupapa, which is history and tikanga. So how do you include history and tikanga into your whānau reunions? So I think the first thing to do is set some goals. And you'll know in your own family whether you're a family that's been raised with a heap of tikanga, or whether you've been a raised family that's been quite disconnected, or whether there's a whole mix. And so when there's a whole mix, You've got to work at the lowest common denominator to help bring others up to another level. And so set some goals, and if it's really simple stuff, make sure that the family can go away where they've memorized their pepeha by the end of it. Might seem, for those that know a lot more, oh, that's a bit simple, but actually that's a massive growth area. If people can leave after a 2, 3 or 4 day family reunion and they go with knowing their pepeha, going knowing back to at least 3 generations, and can say them out loud, so-and-so had me, or even go back 4 generations. You work with what you know, and if people can do that, that takes, it's a massive goal to achieve. You might have some waiata, you might want to learn, and then once you've got those goals, that actually guide you to the place that you need to be to ensure that people are leaving with something in their kete. In addition, it's really good to get others to do jobs. So it shouldn't just be left to your normal kai kōrero or your normal historian. But if it's something like a pepeha and there are others that already know, then do that and get them to run that, so that it's not the same person doing it. It's a change up of voices, and also you're sharing the load. Another good thing around history is to go and visit a few places. And normally you'll be holding your family reunions at a place that you whakapapa to. So you'll go and visit a wāhi tapu, a couple of urupa cemeteries, and or other marae that you also whakapapa to. So you work that out in your program, and you prepare everybody before you get to those different places, so that you would have done some of the background, and then when you're there, you go, you remember how last night we covered this? So here's the house, and this is where Tupuna X lived, or Tupuna Y built this building, or built this marae, whatever. So that you're sharing the history and then going to it, and you see it in reality. It helps that you've embedded it prior, so that when you're there, a lot more bells or lights come on. When it comes to tikanga, there's nothing like mucking in, teaching the kids how to set up the warepuni with all the beds and the mattresses, the pillows, and all of that stuff. Teaching them how to set tables, because often you can easily do a buffet style. You get your plate, your knives and forks, and then you just fill up your kai like army style. But there's a heap of value in teaching the kids how to set the table, so that they get used to that, so that when they're at the marae in the future, and especially for a tangi, they know how to chip in. And all of the little ones, you might get them a chair or a form, so that they're all up drying dishes that aren't going to break. Just looking at one of the questions. So I'll cover that soon, Matt. But the other thing around tikanga is it's good to do mock runs of pohiri, because when you do a mock run of a pohiri, you can make mistakes. You're at home. It's a relaxed environment. You might set a few things to do, and then you go from there. One of the best examples I've seen of somebody teaching people who have got almost no knowledge, the first thing that they did, instead of teaching them a whole whai kōrero, was just to stand up and say, "Tihei mauri ora, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa." And that's it. Because what you're doing is you're building up confidence. And For those that want to learn more, then yep, you give them more. But for somebody who just needs to build some confidence, start at the really basic space. And so you're teaching them vai kōrero, you're teaching them really basic karanga, so that you get into you become familiar. You become familiar with how things go, so that in the future, you'll be able to perform some of these things. And I think about our different wānanga and family reunions we've had. Doing a mock pohiri always helps, as well as having Tues as whānau, different branches of the whānau, to run morning or evening karakia and all of those different things, so that everybody has a responsibility, and everybody, more importantly, everybody has a contribution to the kete, or to the smooth running of the event. Okay, I think that's a general overview of some of the key things that I wanted to cover tonight. So set some goals as to what you want to achieve and what people want to learn, and then go through the visiting of different places, as well as doing some mock runs. I've got a question here from Matt around how do you navigate challenges that might be in your bloodline or in your whakapapa. And the first thing is to identify what the issue is. Have the discussions as a whānau, talk about it openly, so that it brings it out in the open. I was at a hui today, and there was an example of, how do you deal with negativity that's in a hui? Often the negativity comes from nervousness. And so you've got to let people tuku that, bring it out, tuku it, so that they can move on from that space and then contribute actively. And then I think as you do that, you have that kōrero about the issue. You've also got to discern, because some people will just say it's a family trait and it's been passed down. But is it actually a family trait, or is it just somebody who's saying that because they're dodging that it's actually their line? And so you've got to do a lot of discernment to work through these issues. And then once you work through that, you need somebody who can help you go through a process of karakia. There may be somebody in the family, there may not be, and if there's not, then you have to identify someone else that can work you through a process to karakia and clear that raru that has been passed down your bloodline or your whakapapa. And then you work through that. That's a really quick response to that. But you've got to discuss it, and then you've got to find the right skills to help you work through it. In addition, there are those who will want to hold on to it no matter what. So that makes it harder. And that can also then create continued patterns. So you've just got to make sure you've got the right skills to take people on the journey and release. And sometimes you also got to let something physical go to release it as well. Kati. Well, that's just a little overview. That's just a little overview. And so talking about whānau reunions, and in particular, how you navigate history and tikanga in your whānau reunion so that you can grow people and lift people up. Ka te ake, e mihi ana ki a koutou, I roto I tēnei pō, Che Wilson here from Te Pai Pai Waho, linking to a range of platforms tonight. Tēnei ka mihi atu, tēnā koutou, rire hau, pai mārire.